Welcome to NACD BoardVision, where leading boardroom advisors, governance professionals, and seasoned directors discuss critical issues related to your responsibilities in the boardroom.
Hi, I'm Steve Kalan with NACD. Welcome to BoardVision. Joining me today is Joe Decilveo, a partner with McGladrey and an expert on corruption law compliance and FCPA. Welcome, Joe.
Steve, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
As more companies are doing business overseas, boards need to pay attention to applicable corruption laws. At the same time, enforcement actions are strengthening. How far-reaching are these corruption laws, in particular, the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act?
Well, you're right. Enforcement actions have been increasing in recent years, and not just in the U.S. We now see more countries pursuing enforcement of anti-corruption laws, and with the passage of Sarbanes-Oxley, greater responsibilities now reside with management. Corruption laws in most countries include prohibitions against commercial bribes, in addition to bribes for government officials. The primary responsibility for compliance rests with the company, but boards of directors need to be asking management about their programs.
Tell us more about this increased focus on non-compliance and the recent changes regarding the ideas of turning a blind eye or willful neglect.
An increase in regulatory authority activity has led to more comprehensive investigations. For example, many regulators are no longer tolerating the excuses of turning a blind eye or willful neglect. Simply asking if policies and procedures are in effect does not constitute an appropriate level of diligence. Boards need to ask, how do we test for and detect non-compliance? And how do we deal with matters once they are uncovered at the individual and country operating level? These questions and their answers represent the minimum knowledge that boards need regarding corruption and compliance issues in today's environment.
What are the ramifications of failure to comply?
Steve, there are many. To start, corporate fines, individual fines and/or imprisonment, significant reputational risk, and the potential for additional investigations from the IRS, not to mention the disruption and loss of business.
Joe, you mentioned individual fines and/or imprisonment. Has there been a shift in liability from corporations to individuals?
The FCPA has always provided for individual penalties resulting from non-compliance. Authorities have reasoned that to penalize the company, and thus the shareholders, doesn't necessarily fully address the violation. Liability has not shifted from corporations to individuals, but equally includes individuals as well as corporations.
The SEC and DOJ recently formalized new statutes on Dodd-Frank mandated whistleblower bounty provisions and associated financial incentives for reporting allocations. Has this made an impact on whistleblower activity here in the States?
Not really. The jury's still out on whether or not the financial rewards now available to whistleblowers have increased the reporting of actual criminal cases.
What about organizations self-reporting violations? Is this best practices? Are there any hard and fast rules for directors to follow?
There are pros and cons to each situation, and it's best to look at these on a case-by-case basis. Boards, with the help of outside counsel, need to think about the ramifications of self-reporting. Intuitively, it would seem reasonable that self-reporting would reduce penalties and liabilities, but there's no sound evidence that proves this to be true.
With what appears to be an increase in the enforcement activity around corruption laws, Joe, give us your final thoughts for board members today.
First, challenge the comprehensiveness of your program. That is, how does it extend to third parties, the monitoring procedures, and the corrective action taken after finding alleged non-compliance. And finally, be involved. Ask these tough questions of executive management and be diligent and thorough across the entire enterprise.
This was very helpful. An excellent recap of international corruption laws and FCPA news. Joe, thanks for joining us today. For NACD, I'm Steve Kalan, and this is BoardVision.